Hey there, EB here on our Anything But Bland weekly update. Happy Friday to everybody. I just got back from Colorado skiing with Renee and my son Davis and a couple friends. It was a great week. Not a lot of snow out there this year. Out west in some parts, certainly Colorado is getting dumped on like it usually does, but the mountains did an amazing job with the snow. So able to, do groomers. I'm going to have a left knee replacement surgery April 2nd to go with the right one that I had a couple years ago, and hopefully I'll have a better result dealing with the initial pain. But I'm looking forward to it. Had some knee braces that really helped and enabled me to ski. So it was a fun week, and now I'm coming back to South Carolina. It's 78 degrees. Trees are blooming, starting to see some pollen. That means spring's just around the corner. Um, so let's just jump in. This morning, my partner Ronnie Richter and I filed a lawsuit in the District Court of Charleston against Congresswoman Nancy Mace and some John Does 1 through 5 that may have assisted her. As some of you know, Nancy Mace gave a couple speeches on the House floor beginning February 10th, where she accused 4 individuals of being rapists, sex traffickers, and predators. And before she gave that speech on the House floor, she released that speech to the media, to Alan Wilson, and to some media outlets. And afterwards, she commented on the speech that she gave on some Twitter posts, as well as posting a poster outside of her office where she named our client Brian Musgrave as a predator. We gave her the opportunity to um, retract it and apologize for it. She chose not to. And so Brian Musgrave has no option to other than to clear his name through litigation. And so we've asked the court not only to have money damages assessed for the libel and defamation per se. In defamation law, if you're accused of a crime, which he was, or your business character is impugned, or you're accused of having a loathsome disease, such as venereal disease, and you're accused of being unchaste, those 4 elements are known as per se, and you don't have to prove your damages. Um, Brian Musgrave certainly isn't a public figure, so you don't have to prove New York actual time, New York Sullivan actual malice that you would against a public figure. He is not a public figure. He didn't inject himself into the public domain. Nancy Mace dragged him in against his will. So the lawsuit raises some really neat issues under the speech and debate clause under the Constitution. Does Nancy Mace have the uh, immunity that would protect her for anything that she says on the House floor? That is going to be debated whether her statements that may be construed as individually motivated or not in connection with her congressional duties. Does she have protection for that? And then things that happened outside directly by her or indirectly through others. Does that speech and debate immunity protection expand? So we gave a press release. It's about all I'm going to say on the matter. The complaint is very deep, factually rich in detail. Um, so if you want to see it, it's on file on the PACER docket on the United States District Court, and you know we'll do the talking in court. So with that said, let's jump into some world and events, both internationally and that are affecting us locally. As expected, Putin has not accepted the ceasefire proposal that the United States, Ukraine, and the Saudi Arabians brokered. Putin has said that before he will ever consider a ceasefire, the United States has to stop delivering weapons to Ukraine, and Ukraine has to agree not to train its soldiers or do anything with its soldiers or moving weaponry for 30 days. And they have to give up and concede that land that Putin just took in one of the Ukrainian cities. And this is before he will agree to sit down and talk about a ceasefire. And I'm not condemning President Trump. This is a really tough task. When you negotiate with Russia, it's like trying to nail Mercury to a wall. Uh, you take 5 steps forward, but then you don't realize until you're 10 steps back. Um, Putin is a cagey, wily creature, human who plays everybody he's in contact with. I will say that President Trump said that he would be able to settle the dispute in 24 hours. He said that he would even be able to settle it before he was inaugurated. And I think what he is saying is that international diplomacy is tricky, takes a lot of work. You have to have good relationships. And so we'll see how it uh, plays out. Yesterday, a district court judge in California who was appointed by Clinton uh, put an injunction in place from Doge or President Trump, terminating employees from the Board of Education, from FEMA, as well as the Department of Energy that are probationary employees. What he said was that he may expand it to other departments and other firings. The government has procedures in place that if you're going to fire somebody who's a probationary employee, you got to give 60 days notice. It's called warn. Um, and you have to show that they are not performing in a meritorious fashion, which was not done. President Trump didn't want to wait the 60 days, obviously. And so this is going to be appealed up to the Supreme Court. What you're seeing is, good afternoon, Lisa. Good to see you. This is my neighbor, Lisa Neshat. What you're seeing is that the courts are uh, enforcing the law. The law is that Congress has to be the one to eliminate these departments and eliminate the funding once it's been allocated. A lot of these funds that they're now not deploying the executive branch or they're trying to stop have already been allocated, and the Congress has the power of the purse. And so there's certain procedures that need to take place. Look, there is a place for Doge. There is a place for cutting fraud, waste, and abuse. But what they have to do is do a report, send it to Congress, and Congress needs to act. You know, Congress constantly deferring to President Trump and to Elon Musk. They're abrogating their responsibilities. They don't want to have to be responsible for the cuts to these departments. Social Security, for instance, Elon Musk has been going on TV over the past week saying that Social Security is a communist proposal. And what the Democrats intend to do is bring everybody in the country, legally and illegally, put them on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And then once they do that, they have their votes. And so he wants to privatize Social Security. Um, so that is a real big thing. The Supreme Court has said last week that the foreign aid that they wanted to shut down can't be shut down again because it's been allocated funds. They didn't agree to take a case and they wanted it to play out in the lower courts after Trump appealed it up to the Supreme Court. Just so you know, Trump is losing 3-1 every single case that is brought into court since the inauguration. Now, this is what he wants. He wants to be able to lose in court and to be able to tell the American people that the court system is corrupt. Now, I think we're finally going to see whether he adheres to an order of court by this California judge who said that these people need to be reinstated and who were terminated. And so we'll see if that happens, or they say that the court order is going to be disregarded and we have a constitutional crisis. The press secretary Levitt said yesterday that this was a corrupt judge, a rogue judge, and that this judge has no authority to uh, condemn and to rule against what President Trump has ordered. And she said, if he wants to do that, then he needs to run for president. What's interesting is a lot of the MAGA faithful are now attacking Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. She is a former United uh, States Court of Appeals judge. She also taught taught law at Notre Dame Law School, a brilliant jurist, and she is a procedural wonk. And what she held, along with Judge Roberts, not to take the case, it was a 5-4 vote. Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas voted to take the case. She said it was not procedurally right. But what's interesting now is the MAGA faithful are starting to attack her and say that she's a wolf in sheep's clothing and Trump never should have appointed her, which I think is a bit unfair. And we'll see. Roberts and Coney Barrett could be the firewall for a lot of the things that President Trump wants to do. And they could rule with the more liberal justices, Sotomayor, Kagan, on the Supreme Court. Um, Next, this tariff yo-yo that's going back and forth. You saw what has happened to the stock market over the past week. It's lost 10%. Now, Trump used to say that the stock market was the bellwether of how the economy was doing. He said when he ran, and even before he was inaugurated after the election, that the stock market's going to fly when he becomes president. Stock market's lost more than 10%. You get to 15%, you move to a bear market, you move into a recession. Trump and some of his acolytes have the people that follow him, all his sycophants, have said that the tariffs will hurt the economy in the short term, that we're going to have a light recession, but in the long run, it'll be great. What you're seeing, though, is a lot of these companies are pulling back on hiring, on how much they're going to put in R&D because of the uncertainty. When you start tariffing aluminum and steel, and you start to tariff car parts, and you start to tariff dairy products, it creates a whipsaw effect and the uncertainty in the economy. Certainly, consumer confidence is not high right now. For the first time in 8 years, President Trump's approval rating for the economy is lower than his overall approval rating. And that never has happened before. Even in his 4 years of being a president, the approval rating for him on economic and financial things are much higher than his overall approval rating. So it's interesting to see that Trump is now downplaying the stock market and whether that is a barometer of how well the economy is doing. He has admitted that there's going to be short term pain. Europe is now invoked tariffs on aluminum and steel, and Trump yesterday put a 200% tariff on champagne and wine from Europe, which will affect it. Kentucky is screaming bloody murder because they're not able to export their bourbon all over the world. So it's creating confusion instead of strength, centering around his economic policy. Now, we have the House that approved their continuing resolution budget that would extend the current budget with certain cuts to VA and military over the next 6 months. And then during the next 6 months, they would work towards a final budget, which would include all the wish items that President Trump wants. The Republicans passed it with a 100% vote in Congress. One Democrat did vote for it. One Republican, Thomas Massie from Kentucky, voted against it. And it's now in the Senate. And the House left. There was no negotiations with the Democrats. Initially, the Senate indicated that they were not going to pass what was sent to them, the continuing resolution from the House. Senator Schumer, the minority leader of the Senate, he proposed a 30-day CR continuing resolution, and then they negotiate the budget with a bipartisan committee. He flipped last night and said that he's actually going to vote for it. It's easy to say, hey, let's shut down the government. But the Republicans would now blame the Democrats for that. And you shut down the government for 3 weeks, you're going to create so much pain in this country. And it's going to give the authority to Trump and to Elon Musk to determine what gets funded and what doesn't. At least with the continuing resolution, everything that's on the books gets funded, except some VA cuts and military cuts. And again, it's Trump attacking our veterans. And therefore, people's livelihoods will not be affected if there is this government shutdown. And so you're damned if you do if you're a Democrat, and damned if you don't. And what this shows is there's just really the Democrats are powerless at this point. The Republicans do own the economy. The Republicans own everything that's happened foreign policy wise. I know Trump will continue to blame Biden for inflation or anything that happens wrong. He's going to blame Biden, but that's okay. The Republicans in the country know it, own it, because they have the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the Supreme Court, as well as the presidency. So it, you know, he's attacking hard Canada. Canada was going to put a tariff on electricity to 18 states. He was going to tariff dairy being exported. and imported from Canada. Trump was, and Canada was going to swing back. I don't understand it because Canada is such a small trading partner um, for things that are important to Trump, very important to our country, electricity and dairy. He wants to reshape the car industry. You saw this week that he had a little car showroom with Elon Musk and his Tesla cars. I think that is really problematic. I get it that when Biden did it, he did it with the three big automakers, Ford, Chevy, um, and Dodge. Uh, but the fact that Trump was against EV vehicles, electric vehicles, and now he had a showroom, and he himself bought a Tesla and begging people, imploring them to buy Teslas. I think it's really a conflict of interest because at that point, you know, Elon Musk and his companies are doing business with the federal government. There is a contract to supply EV vehicles that may be terminated. So it just was a little bit surprising that he focused on Tesla. I get it that Tesla stock is getting hit hard. If everybody's listening to me, I said you got to be a fool if you are a Democrat buying a Tesla, and certainly Tesla can't make a living um, and stay afloat if they're only going to sell cars to Republicans. So, Trump wanted to help out a friend who's doing a good job and taking a hit. Tesla dealerships are also the subject of protests, some vandalism, and Trump now wants to say that if you get caught doing it or online boycotting Tesla, that it can be considered a terrorist act. I find that really interesting. There was also a boycott yesterday at Trump Tower by some pro-Palestinian Jews who are against the Columbia student from being deported, and we'll get into that in a second. Um, the problem is when he's doing these tariffs and then implementing them, and then the next day cutting them or modifying them. The problem is it looks like he's starting to back down to Canada and Mexico and Europe. He hasn't modified any of his Chinese tariffs. And I agree with China. We do need to tariff. I don't think we should be tariffing Mexico and Canada. In fact, Canada has very low fentanyl going across the borders, and there's very low illegal immigrants crossing the northern border. Southern border is a major problem, and I get that. And so the problem is he's crying wolf with these tariffs, and it looks like he's backing down. Initially, Trump last week stopped sharing intelligence with Ukraine and stopped sending weapons to Ukraine. And as a result, it was a good thing because Zelensky came to the table and agreed to a ceasefire. And now the United States is supplying weapons and sharing intelligence with Ukraine, but that is a roadblock for Putin, who will not agree to a ceasefire if that continues. Um, we had our first firing squad execution in South Carolina last Friday, and I think it's the first firing squad in 15 years across the country. It's interesting. All three shooters had live bullets. There wasn't one that didn't have a live bullet. They don't shoot for the head, they shoot for the heart. And only their rifle and the a spot on a wall was open so that they could shoot, so that the people who were in attendance, as well as the person who was being executed, couldn't see who the shooters were. So I found that interesting. Obviously, we know that chemical execution, sometimes uh, the poison works and it's quick. Other times it doesn't. Certainly, the electric chair. We've seen situations where people actually go on fire before they are killed. So, firing squad, although barbaric, seems to be an instantaneous death once the bullets pierce the heart. We are having, some economic stress. I said the consumer confidence is down, our GDP is down. Now inflation went down since January. There's been modest unemployment, so we'll have to see what effect all these firings take place now, because the figures were only through February 12th that were released last week. One thing that I found interesting is that President Trump ordered the erasing of independent data that the government agencies use when talking about foreign policy and the economy. So these statistics of GDP, of growth in different areas of the country, or interest rates, or everything, Trump wanted all that data erased because he has a certain narrative that he wants to promote with his economy. And if there are these objective, independent facts that are showing contrary to what he's saying, it's going to hurt his messaging. Remember, Kellyanne Conway said in 2016 that Trump has his own alternative set of facts. So he's a heads I win guy, tails I win, because if it's a problem, he blames it on Biden. If it's a good thing, he takes credit for it. The deportation case that I talked about is really interesting. Um, his name is Kali. He is one of the leading vocal spokespersons in the Columbia University anti-Israel uh, protests. He is egged students on and egged protesters to come onto campus, so much so that they stopped live classes last spring. They've done some vandalism to some of the university property. For me, I don't think this is a First Amendment case where he has been arrested, his green card has been revoked, his student visa, and he's going to be deported. He's in Indiana right now, and his lawyers are trying to bring him back to New York City so that they could have a deportation hearing. But I don't think it's a First Amendment issue. I think it's more of an immigration issue. We have the right, if somebody is an enemy of our country and acting in a way um, to the best interests of our country and threatening lives, which are students, and creating public disturbance, as well as preventing these students who paid for getting an in-person education. I really do think that it is much different than somebody who would be protesting on behalf of Ukrainians, let's say in front of a congressional office or in a Russian embassy. That is a speech issue. But when you start to invoke violence and you prevent people from traversing across the campus and you create property damage, I think it's a different story. Linda McMahon, who is the secretary of the Board of Education, has indicated that they're going to cut 50% of the allocated funding under the existing budget that has already been approved, um, and that mostly um, they are trying to eliminate positions that they consider to be ministerial. The union that protects federal employees have said mostly women and blacks are being targeted, um, and that she is going to then work with Congress to actually eliminate the entire Board of Education. I think that that's a problem. These people are losing their job not because of any ideological beliefs, but simply because they want to cut government. They're not doing it because they've not proceeding under merit, that they've gotten bad employee views. And again, a lot of this funding goes to disabled children. It goes to providing um, money for equal gender sports, female sports that may not be um, profitable like football and college basketball are. So, services are going to be affected. The Pell Grants and scholarships are going to be affected. Um, the EPA announced the most sweeping, I think it's Lee Zeldin, his name, he's from former House member from New York. They announced sweeping rules where they're going to let power plants conduct pollution that was prohibited over the last 15 to 20 years. They're going to permit them to discharge materials into the environment that has been prevented since the 80s. They're going to reverse car makers' directive that they produce cleaner energy cars. So this is a huge thing for our environment. Remember, when I was younger, we had Love Canal, we had 3 Mile Island nuclear things. All of the deregulation that's going to take place and all the different things, for instance, on coal-fired power plants and coal plants and coal mining operations, they have fluids that are discharged from where they're taking coal from, and they create these coal ponds that are very toxic. They are going to release those regulations and let them do that. And so I think what we're seeing is we're going to see some environmental injustice happening. And again, conservatives like environment, conserve mean conservative, they conserve the environment. Mark Sanford, the former governor, was uh, wildly successful in keeping government property and making it designated into parks and preventing the wholesale felling of trees for commercial purposes. Trump, in order to deal with the Canadian tariffs and stopping the importation of lumber, has opened up federal parks and federal land to have those trees being taken down and used. Again, I think we all want green space in our country, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I think these rollbacks will leave the nation sicker. I think our air, water, and soil will be dangerously contaminated. The Trump administration, I think, is attempting to subvert the EPA's mission for one of protecting public health, protecting the environment, um, and all this is done to promote the interests of people who have their facilities that do pollute, and to help the billionaires who own these companies. Um, Again, a judge has ordered Trump to reinstate fired VA employees, employees of the IRS. They're trying to eliminate 80,000 employees in the IRS. So, it's a full frontal attack on every major department that I think the conservatives don't like, whether it's the IRS, whether it's EPA, whether it's energy, whether it's the Board of Education, whether it's providing aid. We're seeing a rise in measles cases, all these other things. And Kennedy is imploring people to consult with their physicians, Robert Kennedy, but not telling them to get vaccinated. Um, the next thing is we had an interesting decision yesterday. A law firm named Perkins Coie out of Washington, D.C., represented a lot of the people in the January 5th hearing and in a couple of the witnesses in the impeachment hearings. And so Trump did an executive order that said any lawyer from their firm cannot do certain government cases and are prohibited from going in government buildings, such as courthouses. Um, they were represented by some powerhouse law firms that do a lot of business in the government, Covington Burling, and the Williams firm out of Baltimore, Williams Connolly. The judge wrote, I think her name was Beryl Howe. She wrote and announced her decision orally and publicly and said that this is really targeting law firms, that law firms have the right to represent people. That's what we want. They should have equal access to the federal building. And she said it was an autocratic attempt to silence and kill the advocacy and speech of people that you disagree with. Looking at sports, we have a lot of movement that took place in football this week. We have Sam Darnold going to the Seattle Seahawks. I think he signed for $30 million a year for 3 years. They traded Geno Smith, their quarterback, to the Raiders, who now is going to work with his former coach, Pete Carroll. Daniel Jones left Minnesota, signed a $14 million contract with the Baltimore Colts, and he will compete with Anthony Anderson out of Florida, a third-year quarterback who's had some ups and downs. Kenny Pickett from the Eagles was traded to the Browns. Gardner Minshew of the Raiders was traded to back up um, Pat Mahomes. I don't know where Carson Wentz went. Mac Jones, who was a backup to Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, went to the 49ers. Myles Garrett, who I think is probably the best defensive player in the NFL, re-signed with the Browns. Joey Bosa left the Chargers and went to the Bills. Really great player, five-time Pro Bowler since 2016, but really injury prone. When he's healthy, he's a sack king. Seattle signed DeMarcus Lawrence away from the Dallas Cowboys at $30 million a year. Um, the two quarterbacks that are left to make a decision are Russell Wilson. Where is he going to go? Is he going to go to the Giants, or is he going to go to the Vikings? The Vikings right now, they only have McCarthy as their quarterback. They lost Jones and they lost Darnold. McCarthy was injured last year, all of last year from Michigan, so we don't know what he's going to do. Looks like Rodgers probably will go to Minnesota. Justin Fields left Pittsburgh and went to the Jets, signed a 2-year deal. So he's going to be their quarterback for Aaron Glenn, the new coach. I'd like to see Rodgers actually go to Pittsburgh. Which interesting, LeBron, who was playing so well with Luca, Luca actually had 33 points, I think, in the first half last night. LeBron's out for 2 weeks with a pulled groin. Still an amazing season for a 40-year-old guy, almost averaging a triple double. I still think he's one of the top 5 best players in the league. SGA for the Thunder is probably the best. Then you have Giannis, um, uh, Jokic, Giannis, some really great players. Um, the Snow White new movie from Disney is getting panned. It's a DEI and woke wreck. They are not marketing. They're not going to do a red carpet for it. They're not talking about that she sings songs to find a prince and true love, that she's singing songs about becoming a leader. I don't think that's the Snow White story that everybody wants to hear. So we'll see how that plays out. Here's some weekly wrap up questions. Sarah says, do you think we'll ever get a prison update on Alex Murdaugh? Like he is now a ringleader in prison. How is he faring amongst his people? Um, I don't think we're going to get the full story. It's not going to be released, obviously, by the South Carolina Department of Corrections. But if he's brought up on rules violations, we'll hear about it. And if he gets an interview with a journalist, which I don't think he's going to get because the SCDOC will not let it. But maybe a family member or maybe somebody or maybe another prisoner will say what's happening to their family member and it'll get out. But right now it's tight lipped. We pretty much don't know what he's doing on a day to day basis. Um, RS asked me, how often am I speaking with Alan Wilson, the South Carolina Attorney General, for an update on the Stephen Smith case? He's making a run for office, right? Time to remind him what the job is really about. Squeaky wheels get oiled and get the grease. I don't speak to Alan Wilson about the Stephen Smith case. I speak to Chief Keel of SLED, as well as some of the investigative officers. And as everybody knows, I'm really not being told anything. I do speak to Alan Wilson on occasion about other legal matters, and we're talking to his office now about a historic case that happened in the 1890s involving Willie Leapart, who was lynched. He was tried as a 16-year-old black adult, male adult, for allegedly raping a white 17-year-old girl in Lexington, South Carolina. He was charged on January 18th, 1891. His trial took place on February 20th, 1891. He only had a lawyer for 2 days, and he was not allowed to bring forward witnesses on his behalf. He was ultimately convicted. The governor of South Carolina, 3 months later, gave him a new trial. Actually, then the appeals went to the governor, and the governor saw how it was a lack of due process, ordered a new trial. And before he could be transferred from Lexington to Richland County, South Carolina, a lynch mob went into the prison and he was shot over 200 times. So we're talking to the attorney general as well as the solicitor about what we can do to make sure that justice was done correctly in that case. It's not only about new cases. If there was injustice done, we want to correct it because, as Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And I also heard a great quote by um, Martin Luther King, who said, although you may not think it, uh, this is the right time to always do something right. So if you're going to do something right, even though you think it's an inopportune time, there's never a wrong time to do something right. Catherine said, Murdaugh delays. Isn't Curtis Smith's attempted insurance fraud case almost 5 years old? I agree. He's still on charged with trying to commit insurance fraud, as well as Alex Murdaugh on that roadside shooting. Why can't Curtis Smith's lawyer just provide evidence that Alex never had life insurance and therefore get the charges dropped? He may have had life insurance, but a claim was never actually made. So it's a question of whether insurance fraud was actually committed. But I do agree that something needs to be done with those cases. Um, she also asked, why aren't Becky Hill's wiretapping charges being pursued? that's kind of serious breach to be hanging over the Walterboro courthouse. I do agree. Where does that investigation stand, both from an ethics standpoint and the criminal investigation, not only in her son for the wiretapping, but for her own behavior? Justice moves pretty slow. You're starting to see it. So there were lots of questions that came in about Nancy Mace, and I think I addressed that in my opening statement. Let's go and see if everybody here. I said hello to Lisa Nashek, a really good friend of mine. Jennifer Carolla said, I don't think Putin wants to end the war. I totally agree on that. Sammy Smith says, I wouldn't believe anything Trump says, even if he was sitting on a stack of Bibles when he said it. That's an interesting thing. We have had people actually swear on a Bible. Nancy Mace put her hand on the Bible when she was on the House floor, and she was uh, uh, allegedly slandering our client Brian Musgrave. So people have been known to put their hand on a Bible and possibly later on being proved wrong and not telling the truth. Um, Corey Burns says Congress owes us a "What did you do in the last 5 days?" email. Yeah, um, I want to know what Congress is doing. I want to know what Doge is doing. Doge is supposed to be putting up wall on a wall, explaining what they're doing, explaining the cuts that they're doing, how much money they saved. We already know that they said they saved $108 billion, but that's already been proven false. It was taken off. They proved the agency that the money was already spent and allocated and funded, and somehow it got back up on the wall of Doge that they now are still contending they saved $100 million. I think he owes a status email. I think Congress owes a status email. They need to be doing more town halls. Nancy Mace canceled her town hall meeting that she was supposed to have live last weekend. And I saw a billboard that said, it's time for Mace to show her face, which I thought was pretty catchy. Um, Diane, Sammy said, Gene He said, Sammy, he didn't put his hand on the Bible during his oath. That's an interesting thing. I didn't see that. I guess that was the oath when he took office. Diana Arrington asked me to read Dark Money. This isn't about frontman Trump. It's about billionaires wanting no laws or regulations so they can make more billions. I do believe we are moving towards where there's a lot of oligarchs, whether it's Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, or some of the tech people that are going to benefit greatly over the next 4 years. Trump has received over $100 million from outside investment in the United States. One of the things that they're really concerned about, Trump's companies, what they're concerned about is a $100 million semiconductor investment that Taiwan is going to be making into the United States. And people are concerned that you have to pay to play with Trump, that if he's going to support you when China invades Taiwan, so it will no longer be democratic. Is this a payoff for Trump supporting Taiwan? Casey Odell said, have you watched the documentary We Beat the Dream Team, the greatest upset you never heard about? I'm going to watch it. I love Larry Bird. He's the best trash talker of all time. In fact, Larry Bird and Julius Erving, one of my favorite players, two of my favorite players, other than Maravich. And there's a photo of Bird and Dr. J grabbing each other's throat. You need to look it up. But neither one has signed that photograph. I have it. It's so intense. So thanks, Casey. That is the weekly update. I appreciate everybody listening to me rant and ramble on. I want everybody to have a good weekend and keep fighting and don't lose hope.